Hello, welcome to Learn English with Technology podcast series, episode 18. Today we're going to be diving deep into how smartwatches can help you learn English in the year 2025. We've got some really fascinating sources here that suggest it's way more than just vocab flashcards on your wrist.
Yeah, it's really about going beyond those basics. We're talking about leveraging the power of AI and personalization to create like a truly immersive and effective learning experience.
I'm excited to unpack this. One of the things that really jumped out at me was how much potential there is in just the basic setup of a smartwatch. We're not just talking about downloading an app, it's about tweaking the settings to make the device work for your learning.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting here is that each watch brand has its own unique features. For example, some Apple Watches can actually predict when you're most likely to practice based on your daily routine and then suggest optimal study times.
So instead of just getting those generic reminders that we all tend to ignore, your watch is actually learning your habits and suggesting times when you're most likely to be receptive to learning. That's pretty cool.
It is. It is. And it goes beyond just scheduling. The Samsung Galaxy Watch, for instance, lets you customize your watch face to display rotating English phrases throughout the day. So you're passively absorbing new vocabulary just by checking the time.
I love that. It's like those little sticky notes people used to put all over their house,
Yeah.
but way more high-tech. And then there's the Fitbit approach,
Yeah.
which uses language zones, similar to exercise rings, but for English engagement. So you're gamifying your learning and getting that little buzz of satisfaction when you hit your goals.
Gamification can be really powerful. And it's not just about completing tasks, but about really comprehending the material. Some apps use your watch's sensors to track not just whether you finished a lesson, but whether you actually understood it.
So it's not just about checking boxes. It's about making sure you're actually absorbing the information. I like that. But what really blew my mind was how these smartwatches are basically turning into mini language schools on your wrist. We're talking about micro-learning throughout the day, not just dedicated study sessions.
Right, and that aligns perfectly with how we naturally learn languages. It's about immersion and repetition over time, not just cramming during dedicated study sessions. We're seeing some really innovative features in this area.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, for one, there's real-time voice recognition that analyzes your pronunciation and gives you haptic feedback to help you feel the correct sounds. It's like having a pronunciation coach right there on your wrist.
Wow, so you're not just hearing the correct pronunciation, you're actually feeling it too. That's amazing. What else?
Some apps are using motion sensors to help you practice writing English letters in the air. And then there's the AI-powered personalization aspect.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about that.
So imagine your watch learning your schedule and adapting the content accordingly. No more generic lesson plans. It figures out when you're most receptive to learning and adjusts the difficulty level based on your heart rate and attention patterns.
So it's like having a personal tutor who knows exactly when to push you and when to ease up. That's incredible. But one thing I'm still wrapping my head around is how health tracking ties into learning efficiency. We all have days when our brains feel sharper than others, right?
Absolutely. And this is where the deep dive gets interesting. Your smartwatch can actually measure your cognitive sweet spots, those times when your brain is primed for learning, based on your heart rate and activity levels.
So it's not just about studying harder. It's about studying smarter.
Yeah.
Your watch becomes this personalized coach, guiding you towards those moments when your brain is most receptive to new information. That's a game changer.
It is. And it goes even further. Your watch can use sleep tracking data to optimize vocabulary retention, switching to review mode if you're tired. It's all about maximizing your learning potential by working with your body's natural rhythms.
I'm blown away by all of this. This is so much more than just a watch. It's like a personal learning assistant that's constantly optimizing your experience.
Exactly. And it's all powered by the incredible advancements in AI and data analysis. It's truly an exciting time to be learning a language.
It really is. We've talked about personalization, micro-learning, and the connection between health tracking and learning efficiency. But there's still so much more to explore.
Right. Next, we can delve into how these watches track your progress, not just in terms of time spent studying, but in terms of actual comprehension and skill development.
That's a perfect segue into part 2 of our deep dive. We'll be back after a short break to discuss how smartwatches are taking progress tracking to a whole new level.
Welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive into learning English with smartwatches. If you're feeling inspired to take your language skills to the next level, you're in the right place.
Oh, I'm ready to keep going. Last time we touched on how cool it is that popular language platforms are integrating with smartwatches. I'm talking Duolingo, Rosetta Stone, Cambridge Learning, they're all getting in on the action.
It's really quite remarkable how this ecosystem is developing. Each platform has its own strengths, and now they can all work together seamlessly on your wrist to create a truly personalized learning experience.
So for example, Duolingo can serve up those perfectly timed mini lessons based on your routine, right?
Precisely. The watch learns your habits and finds those little pockets of time where you can squeeze in a quick lesson. Maybe it's while you're waiting for your morning coffee or during your commute.
And Rosetta Stone is taking their immersive learning approach to a whole new level with the help of motion sensors. Can you imagine practicing "I'm swimming" while you're actually swimming?
It's incredible. Your watch can validate both your pronunciation and your movements. Talk about learning by doing. And for those who are serious about tracking their progress, the Cambridge Learning app aligns the content with your CEFR level. That's the Common European Framework of Reference for languages. So you're always at the right level of challenge, in real time. No more wasting time on stuff that's too easy or too hard.
So you're always being challenged, but not discouraged. That's key. But one thing I was really excited to hear more about is the social aspect of language learning with smartwatches. Tell me, how does that work?
Well, it all ties back to the importance of real-world practice. Language isn't just about textbooks and grammar rules. It's about connecting with other people. And smartwatches are making it easier than ever to do that.
Like those pronunciation battles you mentioned earlier. Sign me up.
Right. Imagine a little friendly competition with someone on the other side of the world. It's a fun and engaging way to practice your pronunciation and get feedback in real time. And then there are the global leaderboards grouped by skill level, so you're always pushing yourself, but not feeling overwhelmed.
It's like having a built-in support system right there on your wrist.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of watch-coordinated study groups. It's like having your watch as a social secretary for learning.
Exactly. It takes the hassle out of finding study partners and scheduling sessions. Your watch can connect you with other learners in your time zone and suggest convenient times to meet up virtually.
But what I'm really curious about is how these watches can help us use English in real-world situations. We've all been there. You're traveling in a foreign country, and you freeze up because you can't remember the right word or phrase.
Oh, it's so frustrating. But that's where the magic of location-based learning comes in. Your watch can actually provide context-aware phrases based on where you are.
So if you're at a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
your watch might display useful phrases for ordering food, right?
Exactly. Or if you're at a museum, it could provide information about the exhibits in English. And it's not just about translation. Your watch can also provide cultural insights to help you avoid any faux pas.
Like, for example, cheers
Hmm.
means very different things in different places.
Right. Your watch can help you navigate those subtle but important cultural differences. And some watches even have smart situational detection. That can sense when you're in a conversation and provide appropriate responses in real time. It's like having a conversational wingman on your wrist.
Amazing. It's like our watches are becoming extensions of ourselves, helping us communicate more effectively and confidently in any situation.
And the best part is, it's only going to get more sophisticated with the power of AI. Imagine a future where your watch can not only track your progress, but actually understand your learning style and adapt the teaching methods accordingly.
It's like having a personal tutor who lives on your wrist. Okay, let's talk about progress tracking. I know a lot of fitness trackers have really detailed dashboards and analytics. Isn't the same for language learning?
It is, and this is one area where I think smartwatches really shine. Remember earlier when we were talking about how motivating it can be to see evidence of your progress? Well, these watches take that to a whole new level.
So we're not just talking about how many hours you've studied, but actual insights into how well you're learning.
Exactly. You can see your vocabulary growth curve, your pronunciation trends. It's like your own language learning fingerprint. And some watches even use pattern recognition to identify how you learn best, turning all that data into a roadmap to fluency.
Hold on, back up a second. How does a watch figure out how I learn best? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It is pretty amazing. Basically, the AI is constantly analyzing your interactions with the language learning apps and content. It notices things like what types of exercises you excel at, when you tend to practice most effectively, and even how you respond to different teaching methods.
It's like having a personal language coach who's observing your every move and tailoring the lessons to your specific needs.
Precisely. It takes all the guesswork out of the learning process. No more wondering if you're focusing on the right things or if you're making progress. The watch is constantly providing feedback and adjusting the program to maximize your learning potential.
That is mind-blowing. And I imagine it's incredibly motivating to see those tangible results. It's like those fitness rings that fill up as you get closer to your goals.
You got it. A lot of these language learning apps are incorporating similar gamification techniques. You can earn points for completing lessons, mastering new words, and even participating in those pronunciation battles we talked about earlier. Some watches even have milestone systems that create a success spiral as you progress.
So it's not just about learning, it's about having fun and feeling a sense of accomplishment along the way.
Huh, that's brilliant.
But I'm curious, with all this AI and data analysis going on, is there a risk of becoming too reliant on the technology? Could we lose some of our own natural ability to learn and adapt?
That's a great question, and it's one that a lot of experts are thinking about. It's important to remember that technology is a tool. It can be incredibly powerful when used correctly, but it's not a replacement for our own efforts and engagement. The key is to find a balance. Use the technology to your advantage, but don't let it do all the work for you.
So it's about using the technology as a support system, not a crutch.
Mhm.
That makes sense. But with all this talk of personalized learning plans and AI-powered tutoring, it makes me wonder, is there a downside to all this data collection? I mean, are we giving up too much privacy in the pursuit of fluency?
That's an important consideration, and it's one that we should all be thinking about as these technologies become more integrated into our lives. It's crucial to be aware of what data is being collected, how it's being used, and what privacy settings are available.
So read those privacy policies,
Go.
even if they're super long and boring.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to adjust your privacy settings to limit the amount of data that's being shared. It's also important to support companies that are transparent about their data practices and prioritize user privacy.
And as users, we have a voice right.
Mm.
We can demand more transparency and accountability from these companies.
Absolutely. And we can also vote with our wallets. If we're not comfortable with a company's data practices, we can choose to use a different product or service.
So it's about being informed, making conscious choices, and advocating for our own privacy rights. Those are all great takeaways. Is there anything else we should keep in mind as we navigate this world of smartwatch language learning?
I think it's important to remember that technology is constantly evolving. What seems cutting edge today might be outdated tomorrow. So be open to new developments, stay curious, and don't be afraid to experiment with different tools and approaches.
That's great advice. It's like learning a language itself. It's a journey, not a destination. And as long as we stay curious, adaptable, and mindful of the potential pitfalls,
Yeah.
I think we can really harness the power of this technology to achieve our goals.
I couldn't agree more. And who knows what amazing innovations are just around the corner. The future of language learning is bright, and I'm excited to see what's next.
Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into learning English with smartwatches in 2025. We've explored the incredible possibilities, touched on some important considerations, and hopefully left you feeling inspired and informed.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this journey.
And a huge thank you to our expert for sharing their insights. Before we sign off, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Like this episode, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below letting us know what stood out to you the most. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, happy learning.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into learning English with smartwatches. We've talked about personalized learning plans, the power of AI, and even those super cool pronunciation battles.
Yeah, we really have covered a lot of ground. And I think we can say pretty confidently that these smartwatches are becoming like incredibly powerful tools for language learners. But I think you're right, there's one more area we need to discuss.
Exactly. With all this amazing technology, there comes a lot of responsibility, both for the companies who are creating it and for us as users, right? So for this last part of our deep dive, let's maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about how we can make the most of smartwatch language learning while still staying mindful of any potential downsides.
I like that approach. It's not about being scared of the technology, but about approaching it thoughtfully. And I think one thing that comes to mind right away is just finding that balance between, relying on the watch and putting in the work ourselves.
You mean we don't want to become so dependent on it, telling us when to study or what to practice, that we forget how to learn independently, right?
Exactly. Think of it like the watch is this amazing coach, but you're still the athlete. The watch can give you the best training plan, track your progress, even cheer you on, but you're the one who has to put in the effort.
So it's about using the technology to enhance our own learning, not replace it entirely. That makes a lot of sense. What are some practical tips for finding that balance?
Well, I think for starters, just be mindful of how much you're relying on the watch's prompts and reminders. Maybe try setting aside some time each day for what we might call self-directed study, where you choose the materials and the activities that you want to focus on.
So even if my watch tells me it's the optimal time to practice vocabulary, I might choose to spend that time reading an article or watching a movie in English instead.
Exactly. It's about staying, engaged and proactive in your learning journey. Don't be afraid to kind of experiment and find what works best for you, even if it goes against what the watch is recommending.
That's a really good reminder. It's so easy to fall into that trap of just passively following the technology, but we have to
Mhm.
remember we are still in control.
Absolutely. I think another tip is to be mindful of how the watch is affecting your learning style. Like if you find yourself constantly checking it for feedback or relying on those gamification features for motivation, try taking a step back and focusing on, the intrinsic joy of learning.
So instead of chasing those points and badges, try to rediscover that feeling of satisfaction that comes from understanding a new concept or being able to express yourself more fluently.
Exactly. It's about tapping back into that internal motivation and passion for learning, which is ultimately what will keep you going in the long run.
That's such an important point. And, it makes me think about something else we touched on earlier, that whole idea of data privacy. We are giving these companies a lot of information about ourselves, from our learning habits to our location, even our emotional responses in some cases. How can we be sure that all this data is being used responsibly?
It's a great question, and it's one that we all need to be asking as these technologies become more sophisticated and, frankly, more integrated into our lives. I think the first step is just being aware of what data is being collected and how it's actually being used.
So read those privacy policies, even if they're super long and boring.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to, adjust your privacy settings to limit the amount of data that you are comfortable sharing. I think it's also really important to support companies that are transparent about their data practices and that really prioritize user privacy.
And as users, we have a voice, right? We
Hmm.
can demand more transparency and accountability from these companies.
Absolutely. And we can also vote with our wallets. If we're not comfortable with the company's data practices, we can choose to use a different product or service.
So it's about being informed, making those conscious choices, and then advocating for our own privacy rights.
Hmm.
Those are all great takeaways. Anything else we should keep in mind as we kind of navigate this world of smartwatch language learning?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that technology is constantly evolving. What seems cutting edge today might be completely outdated tomorrow. So be open to new developments, stay curious, and don't be afraid to experiment with different tools and approaches as they come out.
That is great advice. It's like learning a language itself. It's a journey, not a destination. And as long as we stay curious, adaptable, and mindful of the potential pitfalls, I think we can really harness the power of this technology to achieve our language learning goals.
I couldn't agree more. And who knows what amazing innovations are just around the corner. The future of language learning is bright, and I'm excited to see what's next.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into learning English with smartwatches in 2025. We've explored those incredible possibilities, talked about some important considerations, and hopefully left you feeling both inspired and informed.
It's been a pleasure.
A huge thank you to our expert for sharing all of their insights with us. Before we sign off, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, like this episode, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below letting us know what stood out to you the most. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, happy learning.